afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our Digital Economy Committee event this afternoon. We've got a great panel of speakers for you, and it's going to be a very interesting event. Just before we get started, a little bit of housekeeping on the call for you today. We are in Zoom webinar format today, so you don't need to worry about your camera or your microphone, but I will call your attention to the bottom of the screen where you can see a Q&A box. That is where you can type in your questions throughout the session for our panelists, and our moderators today will call you to ask those questions later on in the presentation. So now, without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to one of our Digital Economy Committee co-chairs, Ms. Som-Oh. If you want to go ahead, please.
Thank you, Heidi, and thank you, the AMCHAM team. Hello, everyone. This session is organized by the AMCHAM Digital Economy Committee and its three co-chairs, Peter Fishback, President of ISM Technology Recruitment, Jamie Brennan, Head of Amazon Global Selling Thailand, and myself, Walipon Sayasit, General Manager from TCC Technology. You may wonder what makes smart cities so smart. We've all heard the phrase smart cities, but how do we separate the hype from the reality? Integrating cutting-edge technologies from the ground up to create sustainable and service-oriented urban environment has the potential to be a game changer for city developers' quality of life. Green energy, healthcare, education, public safety, all can be reimagined through the application of digital technology. Today, we have 4 world-class experts to discuss the potential rewards and risks embodied in this concept and help us understand what they mean for Thailand. We will have a short presentation from each speaker, followed by a Q&A session. I'll let Jamie introduce you to our first 2 speakers. Over to Jamie.
Thank you very much, Kunsama. Please allow me to introduce Mr. Matthew Perkins. He's an Economics Affairs Officer at the Environment and Development Division of the Economic and Social Commission of Asia and the Pacific. He specializes in technology for development issues, in particular smart city applications. His research focuses on determining which technology solutions are best able to produce meaningful development and impact. Please take it away, Matthew.
Thanks very much. I'm very happy to discuss these aspects of the digital divide with the group today. And I'd like to walk us through some hard data on technology performance that can directly inform decision-making around what solutions to roll out and where. The data set that I'm going to be highlighting today is free, open source, publicly available. Anyone can run these analytics against it and help inform the decision-making for these kinds of development decisions. So I'd like to go straight into what the usefulness of these indicators are and how to apply them from this group's perspective. Next slide. So what this data illustrates for us in this visual is a number of cities that we'll draw some comparisons between. The colored lines here graph out retransmission rate. What this essentially means is how much stuff gets lost in the mail. This is the electronic version of how much data is being lost by the network for what percentage of users. And we've zoomed into 4 particular cities here for comparison: Phuket, Busan, Chicago, and Bangkok. I selected these because Chicago and Busan are generally accepted baseline smart city implementation markets. And then we can drill into how Phuket and Bangkok function as comparators there. So we can see by looking at the red and yellow lines that even cities that are considered to be performing well do still lose a certain percentage of the data on their networks, which leads to problems in the capacity to adopt and implement smart city solutions. So with those being understood to be the general average, we can get some fairly surprising conclusions. We know, for example, here, just looking at eyeballing these lines, that the network in Bangkok is dropping far more data than the network in Phuket. This suggests that in targeting the market that has the infrastructure to support smart city rollouts, that the network in Phuket is performing better and more reliably than the network in Bangkok. Let's take a bit of a closer look and go to the next slide. So I've drawn a little red dashed line across the visual here, which helps shows a zoom in perspective of where the customer is really going to notice a fall off in quality in the service of the applications that are being deployed. This threshold is generally held to be about 2%. If your network is losing about 2% of the data or less, you're generally okay. If you're losing more than 2%, customers are going to be seeing service degradations and your smart city applications are going to suffer. So we can see that we're crossing that event horizon for Bangkok much earlier than its comparator cities, around about 45%. So this illustrates the framework of analysis that we can bring into these cities and markets to determine what level of quality of service the customer is likely to experience. So this is what it looks like for 4 cities. I'd like to go to the next slide and broaden our consideration a bit. So here are a selection of cities in Southeast Asia, and I've put a couple of the statistics on this table that we've talked about already. We have the retransmission rate there. So we see that the average, anything that's above 2% is going to be problematic for smart city rollouts that require high performance implications. I've added a column here on average latency. This is the amount of time that the customer has to wait for the data to propagate across the network. Anything above 200 is going to be problematic for high performance smart city applications. So we can see here through this data that we can gain actionable market insights into what smart city applications cities throughout the region are capable of supporting. A quick eyeball of this table shows us that the cities like Hanoi, Da Nang, Phuket are pretty well positioned. Whereas if we want to be looking at rolling out high bandwidth smart city applications in cities like Vientiane, Phnom Penh, and Yangon, we're going to run into some difficulties. So by looking at these indicators, we're able to target the development markets more effectively. I'd like to go to the next slide to show the scope and scale of this. Obviously, the presentations will be available elsewise. I realize there's a lot of data on this particular slide, but this is a cross-cutting analysis of all of the major cities in Cambodia to assess which ones have a network that's functioning at or above or below that critical 200 latency rate. So if I was looking to roll out smart city applications in Cambodia, this is the data that I would want to start with. I would want to take a look at which cities have that infrastructure performing it below that critical 200 millisecond event horizon, and which ones are lagging behind. This will allow me to identify the correct smart city solutions for each location. This data can also be used over a time series to determine which cities are closing that gap or widening that gap, which can help countries, cities, private sector stakeholders to determine how much investment would be necessary to open that market, make those investments in infrastructure to be able to support the types of smart city applications that we're going to be talking about later on in the session today. So this is then going to my next slide as my conclusion. Thank you very much for letting me share this data with you. I look forward to taking questions later on, and I hope that you will find this a useful mechanism to target your smart city applications to the cities that have the infrastructure to use it effectively. Thank you very much, and over from my side.
Thank you so much, Matthew, for that informative presentation. Really wonderful to hear. Please allow me to introduce Mr. Powell Mikalski. Powell's industry experience covers Southeast Asia, Japan, Korea, and the United States with regional roles in architectural design operations for internationally renowned design firms, and as worldwide head of operations for real estate design in Amazon in Seattle. At Amazon, Powell was responsible for creating a BIM implementation plan, which led him into the digital twin space. And now he's a co-founder of DDX. Please, Powell.
Thank you very much, Jamie. Yeah, I think we should probably jump straight in because there's quite a lot of things to talk about. So if we go on to the next slide, it's my first slide. Thank you very much. So the success of a smart development hinges on its digital smart services meeting these 3 criteria. It has to be commercially viable, it has to be people-centric to differentiate the experience of people and communities in and around the developments, and it has to be technically scalable. Next, please. DDX comes from 3 different but complementary backgrounds. Gareth, our CTO, is from the digital transformation and software development world. Carl, our CFO, is from the commercial operations and corporate finance world. And me, I'm from the architecture and design world. Next, please. So as you can see, each criterion is represented by a founder. This combined consulting approach means we can design, develop, and implement commercially viable, technically scalable, and people-centric digital smart services. One of the tools we use to do this is a digital twin as a service platform. It's an existing cloud platform that allows us to co-develop workflows with our clients. It's already seen large deployment in Europe and North America, and it supports both single and multiple sites using a digital twin of the developments that works for both new build and existing buildings. Next, please. Okay, so back to the question. I'm going to focus on the second half of the question because while the technology is clearly here, the ecosystem of disciplines required to actually deliver a smart city isn't. And that's because the entire property development industry has to first undergo digital transformation. Next, please. So this quote describes really well the challenge facing us before we can all live in a smart city. The future is already here, it's just unevenly distributed. Next, please. This chart illustrates a problem of uneven distribution of readiness. Obviously, it doesn't show all the stakeholders, and it's very much a generalization. But as you can see, the technology is already here, and media follows technology. Developers follow media to create new demand through new USPs. EPC consultants follow developers, each with their own learning curves, and contractors follow PMs reluctantly because they hate the added transparency. And then we have interior designers, which are kind of a little bit far behind there. Next, please. First, let's remind ourselves why interior design is so critical to the success of a smart development by contrasting the interior of a Tesla on the left with the interior of the DeLorean from Back to the Future on the right. While yes, these are both cars and not buildings, you can easily imagine what a smart building might look like without a good interior designer. But it's not just about looks. Interior design is one of the most important user touch points because it adds the human-centric buffer between technology and the user. Next, please. So what's the problem? To recap, we're using the interior designer as an example because it's the consultant that has the furthest to go, yet it's responsible for the part of the development that has the most physical interaction with the end user. On the top downside, there's a general oversupply of interior design firms and undersupply of projects. Real estate and PM firms like CBRE or JLL now do interior design in-house. The market expects design firms to be up to date with technology, however, the reality is quite different. And they have comparatively poor business and marketing PR skills. Designers generally set up shop for their love of design more than their love of business. And they continue to do speculative work for free and wonder why their fees are so low. On the bottom up side, there's an undersupply of good creative and tech-savvy talent, and except for office rents, all other overheads are on the rise. Clients have a higher expectation on quality of deliverables. Things like walkthroughs are now becoming more common, and while outsourcing these is one thing, it's often difficult to charge it on when the client expects this as standard. Interior designers have a traditional mindset. This is the way we do things, is something that I often hear. They often have relatively poor PM skills and work under poor commercial terms. And finally, client-side PMs can be a real minefield. Now, it depends entirely on who you get at the individual level, but it's something interior designers have no control over. So in summary, they have downward pressure on fees, upward pressure on costs, but no bandwidth to retool. And that's why progress is so slow. Next, please. Currently, to an interior designer, digital smart services sounds like it should be the engineer's scope, but their mindset needs to change to it's a new service line that can complement what we already do. They need to learn how to leverage creative skills and new services, which bridge the gap between creativity and technology. Currently, updates to technology and updates to interiors are out of phase. Technology evolves constantly, while interiors are expected to last 3 to 10 years, generally, depending on their typology. This can be fixed by future-proofing design. By staying up to date with advances in technology, designers can do more to future-proof design. At the same time, though, Owners and developers need to increase their CapEx budgets to allow spending on future-proof design because the initial outlay is always more expensive. Currently, there's an inconsistent understanding of digital smart services by developers and PMs. While leadership can have the understanding and vision, often those on the ground lack the technical and practical knowledge to deliver. This can be fixed by promoting a comprehensive understanding of digital smart services. They can hire in relevant expertise and hire new consultants who specialize in the space and develop agile standards and workflows that focus on outcomes and allow for methods and technologies to be updated easily. Currently, many EPC consultants are unaware of the business case for digital smart services. This can be fixed by showing them how to create new value and win new clients. For example, develop new value-add services that leverage relevant technologies such as BIM, virtual reality, metaverse, and digital twin, and monetize these services to provide additional revenue streams to help lock in repeat business. Currently, interior designers suffer from software addiction. They have significant sunk cost and expensive AutoCAD licenses and are loath to change. They need to have a more agile approach to software adoption, though. Software advances happen constantly, so the focus should be on outcomes rather than the way we do things. Currently, owner clients and PMs mistakenly believe Revit is the only BIM software. There are other cheaper and easier to use alternatives such as Vectorworks or ArchiCAD. And because owners, clients and PMs don't actually use BIM software, they only know of Revit, so they think BIM equals Revit and BIM equals Revit, sorry. And while everyone knows Revit, often it's not the most suitable option for every consultant or every project. This can easily be fixed by instead specifying any IFC4 compliant software. This opens the door to each consultant using the BIM software that best meets their individual requirements while still providing full data compatibility with the wider project team. Next slide, please. So in addition to specifying IFC4 instead of Revit in RFPs, here are some other things we can do to immediately make a difference. First, recognize and work with the new consultants in this space. Waiting for current consultants to change will literally take years. We need to help all stakeholders understand the business case and the why. Until the whole stakeholder pool is on board, the end product can only be as good as the weakest link. We need alignment of developers, EPC consultants, and the digital smart services consultants throughout the full project cycle. We all need to be pulling in the right direction and focusing on outcomes from strategy through design, construction, and ongoing operations. We need to create and monetize smart services and the communities around them. Next, please. Finally, how can we help? We can define and prioritize the right smart services for your development. In the ongoing COVID world, it's not just greenfield, but also existing offices and facilities that need to review their designs and services to protect the people that are currently using these facilities and to attract more tenants in. We can define the technology and its availability to support those services because one size doesn't fit all. We can identify opportunities and new value-add services for differentiation and revenue growth by looking beyond just the physical asset towards community and user interaction points. For example, marketing suites that provide community services to start generating revenues ahead of time. We can also run the business case to confirm the financial feasibility of these services. We can drive alignment between the various EPC teams during design, build, and ongoing operations. This is always a huge challenge because of the uneven distribution we saw earlier. And finally, we can plan and deliver integrated BIM projects. We can subcontract interior designers and other consultants, allowing us to own and manage the BIM. Next, please. And that's all I have for you today. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much, Kun Powell. Our next speaker is Kun Anthony Arundel. He is the Senior Vice President, Head of Smart City, Fraser Property Holdings, Thailand. He has been in the technology field for over 30 years, holding CTO and senior management positions in various companies in communications, energy, utilities, defense, technology, and real estate industries, and working with many global companies such as Verizon, Nortel Network, IBM, Accenture in the North America and Asia Pacific. Now, please join us in welcoming Kun Anthony Arundel.
Thanks, Kunsom. Much appreciated. Could you go to the next slide, please? So today, I'm just going to give you a bit of a background on our smart city development for One Bangkok. It's a very large integrated project within the center of Bangkok. It's about approximately 1.83 million square meters of GFA. It consists of 5 grade A office towers, 5 luxury hotels, 3 ultra luxury residential towers, and 4 differentiated retail sectors or products. Next slide. So today I really want to focus on what we've done in terms of our design for Smart City within One Bangkok. And actually we had some very key design principles we started with very early on in our process. And they were around basically people centricity, which Paul talked about earlier on, sustainability, and what we call smart city living. You know, how can we make sure that the services that we provide through all the occupants, whether they be tenants or visitors or residents throughout the district, people can benefit and enjoy and make sure that their lives benefit from these smart technologies and the services we provide. So we had, you know, the key things was making people's lives better, creating happiness, be sustainable, create positive human experiences, and how do we establish a built environment which will be able to protect our future generations and give opportunities to people in the community. So, you know, the key for us is we had to start with a vision. The next slide, please. So when we looked at our vision, we wanted to make sure we were livable, workable, and a sustainable city. We needed to make sure that we deliver on our commitment to customer centricity and basically delivering customer experience. Experience matters in what we do. The operational efficiency, how do we improve our operations, and the technology that we underlie is future-proof, for example. And some of the benefits that we really tried to achieve through our design and what we're delivering is around improving occupant experiences, savings in the operations, move to what we call beyond square meters. So in a typical real estate asset in the past, the leasing and the asset managers have been mostly focused around how to lease square meters. What we want to do is actually create those experiences to what we call beyond square meters. Sustainable operations, and then future-proof the district. You know, some of the speakers earlier on have talked about making sure that smart cities are not just there as a gimmick, they have to deliver value right across different many value chains. So we looked at it from a revenue generation, cost optimization, and then how do we equate to from a CSR perspective in our brand equity. Next slide. So again, you know, sustainability and smart city go hand in hand together. We don't believe you can have a smart district without considering sustainable design principles, and you can't have basically a sustainable district without looking at smart technology. So we looked at creating a district which was people-centric, being able to engage the community, giving people a voice and creating change, being able to use that district to enrich people's lives from the work, live, play, stay, and a community perspective, you know, as well as sustainable aspects in terms of energy management, water management, well-being management in terms of indoor air quality, for example, and our environmental operations. Being a district which actually supports not just generations for today, but future generations, and also making sure that we put in the technology that we can actually easily adapt and try to future-proof the district from a space management perspective, right through to the technology that we deliver, to making sure we keep pace with new demands, new experiences, and the new world as it evolves. Next slide. So when we looked at our smart city design and the smart city services, we have our physical infrastructure and the applications. We have our sensor network. So the ICT and the communication network is incredibly important for what we're doing today. All fiber network for actually without One Bangkok, our Wi-Fi and universal Wi-Fi offerings and solutions, our IoT platforms, all of our analytical platforms. Of course, the governance is very key in terms of how do we manage our data, who has access to the data, and how do we use the data? And then integrated operations, and then looking at the business models that will actually support what we call living smart services and the ecosystem of technology partners, people, and business providers. Next slide. So within One Bangkok, we have over 287,000 control points or sensors. We have many different technologies, whether it's from energy management, our sensors and IoT platforms, space and personalization applications, what we call new energy, about how we can actually utilize green energy on our project, and our move to zero, whether it be zero water discharge or net zero energy, for example, and reduce our carbon footprint. These are all very key elements that we've included in the design for our smart city services for One Bangkok. Connected building, you know, I think we're the first in the world that I've seen where we're actually putting a cybersecurity SOC into our district, which is quite unique. And that was because we realized the importance of not just the physical security and the built environment, but also the data security and how we use that information and technology. We have a central utility plant, which we have district cooling and centralized wastewater to actually improve our energy performance and management and how we provide better services to all the tenants and occupants within One Bangkok. So these are some of the areas that we've looked at and we've incorporated in the design of what we call our smart city living services. Next slide. And this is a little bit more detail in terms of the solution map that we've come up with in terms of our customer journey, our smart FM operations and how we manage that from a centralized command center, which is the brain of One Bangkok, our analytics and data management, building management, physical security, ICT, our data center, which is also very key. We have a data center, T3 data center within the district, for example, our governance and our security applications and services. In addition to our power management, the resiliency of the power and energy management within the district, and how we've actually set up all the design and operations for the systems ongoing. One of the key things, Powell talked about a little bit earlier about is the process to go from a smart city design and how we incorporate that into a typical architectural and engineering design. They're quite different processes. They need to be integrated and come together to get the final product and solution operational. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done by developers as well as the designers and main contractors and our smart city teams to make sure that it's fully integrated design and solution. Next slide. So we looked at, we've got robotics, virtual reality, or metaverse and augmented reality. We're looking at is what we call new energy, is how can we adopt green energy throughout the district. Blockchain and payments, how can we utilize different models in terms of whether it be cryptocurrencies or tokens to actually provide better service to our tenants and occupants. So these are some of the areas that we're looking at. We're looking at, for example, supermarkets and day-to-day retail activities and office activities and hotel activities, and how we can integrate those to actually enrich people's lives and give them back time, give them back some happiness and reward, and make sure it's a sustainable and well-lived and well-served district. So really that covers everything I wanted to talk about, the case study for One Bangkok and what we've done in terms of our smart city services. And I thank you very much for listening to me today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tony. And our last speaker is Dr. Thiti Wachalasintopchai, Smart Property Project Director from TCC Technology. Dr. Thiti holds a PhD in Structural Engineering, which is a branch of civil engineering that utilizes a lot of IT, especially big data, algorithm, and computing power. He has been involved in sustainable built environment, green building, energy saving, solar energy, as well as real estate and healthcare. All things convert into what we call smart cities. Now, let's join us in welcoming Dr. Thiti Wachalasintopchai.
Thank you, Khun Som. Okay. I'm waiting for the slides. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Today, I'll share with you. I'll give you a broad scope of what happening in Thailand. Okay. Is beyond urban. We have heard our speakers talking about what is happening in the urban area, and like at One Bangkok, which is in the heart of Bangkok, what is happening. So next slide, please. In general, I have been working with many agencies in the Thai government and our international partners in the past few years. So I'll share with you what it means for Thailand in terms of smart cities. Number one, what exactly is smart cities in the broad scope? I believe this is the message from the UNSCAP, right? And it coincides well with the Thai government. To the Thai government, smart city is somewhat similar to the implementation of the UN Sustainable Development Goal. And there is another word that will be becoming more familiar in the Thai economy is the BCG, bio, circular, and green. If you are in this area, you would say like there's a lot of similarity and some unique intersection around this. But the goal is the same. We want everyone in the society to have a well-being, and in terms in like 17 KPI that are listed here. And I think most of us are familiar with this one. Next, please. What it means for Thailand. We are in the process of public hearing on the next phase of the National Development Plan, which is the 13th version. This plan will start next year, and there was a public hearing starting since last year. Okay, the idea of this plan, I have given the English caption in the below pictures, but in general, the Thai government want to transition our country from the past, which is natural resource and natural resource based industry, right? And we have seen certain milestones of the industrialization. We want to do it further. So from just the plain, not quite advanced technology, we are talking about more advanced thing that takes into account all of the concepts that are discussed in the SDG. In this picture, you will see like how to close the income gap and distribute the revenues to the people in the rural areas and in many countries. And the government use digitization and advanced knowledge in all science to make it happen. Next, please. Okay. From the Thai government, you'll see if you are in the investment area, you would be familiar with this, but let me reiterate this. The Thai government separate the components of the smart cities into 7 areas. First is the environment, next the living, the people, governance, economy, mobility, and energy. Smart environments or environmental concern is a must. So the government says that for anyone who wants to start working on smart cities, smart environment is key concern. We are talking like the pollution, the how to reduce the PM 2.5 or something, the air pollution, the water pollution, the waste, solid waste, and many things. But using these environmental concerns, if you mix it with the BCG economy, bio, circular, green, a lot of technologies have been prevalent in abroad, especially America, I'm sure, right? We have seen a lot of technologies. These technologies that are in the universities, in research, or in labs can be applied and implemented in the Thai context. This is number one. And the next step, if we look in counterclockwise, you'll see smart energy. Smart energy is what we have been talking about, especially during the COP26. Thailand is also part of the initiative to transition towards green energy, the decarbonization of the society. And there's a lot of work to do. We are talking about smart grid, about the what happens beyond the solar farms. So we'll see in Bangkok, I would say, or in proximity of Bangkok, you will see lots of solar rooftop happening. but now battery technologies have been quite advanced. And there are many technologies, including the mandates of the government to improve the energy mix of the Thai energy industry. So you see a lot of things happening within this year, especially after COP26. These are the momentum that needs technologies and things and our partners to be addressed. The next thing is the mobility. Mobility, if you go into Bangkok right now, you see a lot of things happening, like the mass transit, right? The trains, underground trains, sky trains is under construction. More electric or more trains, mass transit system is scheduled to finish within the next couple of years, and within 10 years from now, you'll see things popping up. For feeders, for transportation engineers, you know that, okay, we have the hub, we are starting to talk about transit-oriented development, right? And then the feeders, transportation from the train station to the neighborhoods within that. If you live near Ramapho, you see lots of these things happening. Some use electric vehicles to make a shuttle, like a shuttle bus or shuttle van, from the train station to major destinations. These are some examples. And you see lots of apps beyond Grab or many things to assist people who transport more conveniently. Okay? For economy, the Thai government wants to use digital technologies and e-commerce to improve the livelihood and economics across the countries, not just within Bangkok. Within Bangkok, we'll see it's quite dense. You have lots of apps, platforms available. It's quite more convenient. But the government wants to do these things to the other provinces as well. So there's a lot of rooms for this one to be implemented. For government, we want to have the certain kinds of citizen participation. And for for people, we want to do the transition towards knowledge-based society. Next, please. Yeah. Okay. The government is undergoing the refinement of the goals for this one to make it more measurable. You see some key figures popping up. This is the version 2 of the previous slide. So you see it's becoming more materialized. Okay, next please. Next please. Okay, so now how can we implement it? How to make it happen? I'll show you the building blocks. I noticed from the list of guests, you'll see many of our colleagues are from broad areas. Some are from real estate, some are from technologies, some from the development agencies. So you see, if you look at the bottom, the Thai industry have undergone that one. We were, some people call us like a Detroit of Asia in the past. We are quite advanced in automotive. But what happens for during the decarbonization period? The government wants to promote the production and the adoption of electric vehicle and the charging and all the network around these things. And what happened next? We want to transition from the digital technologies towards these goals, like the wellness. You see, there's some news that we are good at medicals. So we have a lot of patients that comes to Thailand for medical treatment, some for their vacation. There is a lot of gaps between the hospitals and the wellness in the general public. There are many rooms, and I believe there are know-how and technologies from our friends, our partners abroad that can be assist and then put into practice how to realize this. One thing you can see, the Thailand is one of the most, we have a the one of the biggest number of hospital that is JCI certified. JCI is an American standard, right? The Joint Commission International. There's a lot of things to do. There's a lot of checklists to do to achieve that standard. In Thailand, there's a lot of hospital and healthcare facilities to do that. Next thing is on agriculture and biotechnologies. You see, people are more concerned about the food safety and the food traceabilities. There's a lot of things to do. From the farming, the Thai government promotes a lot of organic farming and smart farming. Why? Because if we reduce the use of chemicals in the farming, it helps with the climate change, right? And it helps improve the safety of the people. And then the technologies that are used, from remote sensing, from using apps and advanced technologies to record what is happening in the field, in the farms, can be the database for food traceabilities. People in the supermarket, or you buy it for cooking at home, you can trace what is happening in the food that you buy, the vegetables or the meats that you buy. What is how are they treated? And then these things all use technologies, advanced technologies, digital technologies, and the biotechnologies and science to assist to make this happen. I'll give you this some examples, and then there are many more to discuss. But for today, I should give back to the stage to the host. Thank you.
Okay. Next up is the Q&A session. Thank you, Dr. Titi. The Q&A session will be moderated by Peter and Jamie. Over to you, Peter.
Hi, thanks, Kunsamo. And thank you very much to our panelists. That was really interesting and a lot to take in so quickly. We do have some questions from the audience and a few other topics we'd like to dive into in a little more detail from the presentations. We have a question from Ian Pascoe. Does the panel believe that for Bangkok to become even close to becoming a smart city, we need to have properly constructed and maintained roads, footpaths, etc.? It's fine for developers to have decent infrastructure within the development, but when they connect to the public road system, the contrast is massive. Okay, I guess any or all of you could take that. I think maybe we could start with Tony, maybe because he's right there on the cutting edge of the interface between One Bangkok and the outside world.
Yeah, look, I think when we looked at our smart city, and I think it's in general for all smart cities around the world, you need to look at the environment. It's not just within the built environment that you're doing or constructing. It's actually how you work with the community. So, we did a lot of work with BMA, which is a Bangkok Metropolitan Authority within Thailand, within Bangkok. We also coordinated with external agencies, as well as the communities outside of our district, as well as all the other agencies within Bangkok, like, for example, traffic management, for example, fire and police, for example. So there's a lot of coordination. We did a lot of design in terms of how we can alleviate traffics within our boundary, as well as how do we try to minimize the traffic in adjacent areas also. So, it's a huge issue. I don't have an answer that's going to answer everything, because I think it is a very broad question. It'd be good to get some of the other feedback from the panelists also.
Can share a bit.
Yeah, Dr. Titi, any thoughts on that?
The road was in perfect condition many years ago, but what we are seeing is temporary. What is happening if you come to the road after 10 p.m. They are putting the cables, electric cables underground, and they are building the underground trains stations, and then they even put electric substation within the road in certain junction. This is what happening underground, and I believe within the next few years everything will be completed, and then you'll see we'll have nice and smooth roads in Bangkok.
Have we seen anything in other cities of a good resolution to this issue, Powell or Matthew? Anything that you've seen in other places?
I think one of the things that has changed over the last, I would say, probably 50 years or so, if you look at Singapore, the traditional shop houses they have there that are still around in some places, they were all designed to actually go over the top of the sidewalks, so that pedestrians walking on the sidewalks wouldn't be wouldn't be rained on when it rains, because it rains really hard there, and it also provides shade as well. And then slowly, as developers were making more money, the authorities changed various development guidelines to say that anything that goes beyond the property line is illegal. So then everything started to kind of be back away from the sidewalk, and then sidewalks became more exposed, and it just started to become a little bit less pleasant to walk on the sidewalks. Now, if you look back at Bangkok, I think it's more similar to the latter version of that, where nothing really protects the sidewalks, and it's really kind of a no man's land, because the condition of the sidewalks isn't particularly good either. Now, I know the question was about roads rather than sidewalks, but I think it's part of the same thing. And I think a lot of the responsibility for the condition of that needs to kind of come back to look at development guidelines, and what developers can and can't do, not just on large scale developments like One Bangkok, but on smaller developments too, where budgets aren't quite so big. I think everyone who butts onto a road has a responsibility to look after what that interface and how it affects the communities around them.
Matthew, in terms of the sort of SCAP guidelines or SDG compliant guidelines, is there some aspect that relates to existing integration or integration with existing systems, infrastructure, et cetera?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to come in on this. There are a variety of standards around urbanization and urban design to help manage this type of growth through the built-up areas, and I think some of our speakers have touched on those. One solution that we've also been closely engaged with cities on that can be rolled out in the interim as that infrastructure is being developed and enhanced is smart city applications to address the issue of on-street and on-sidewalk illegal parking of vehicles. Which certainly any of us living in Bangkok and a number of other cities in Thailand know, you can see significant disruptions and traffic congestion from people who park their cars in this way. And so making available apps which direct people to areas where they can legally park without obstructing traffic, and automating the process of identifying and finding those who do not, is an application that can be rapidly rolled out to specifically address this particular problem in how our roads become congested and how our sidewalks become repurposed as urban parking areas. So that's one of the specific actionable solutions that we promote and have seen good results from in this region. Thanks.
And Jamie, you have a few things you might like to ask the panelists.
Indeed. Hello, panelists. Thank you so much for your time. So Matthew and Powell, you both talked about this uneven distribution in access to technology and technology infrastructure. Obviously, these things are going to have a really heavy impact on what Dr. Thidi talked about and also what Anthony talked about. So I'd like to ask a two-part question. For Powell and Matthew, what do you think we can do to help to bridge this digital divide, both now and in the future? And then for Dr. Thidi and Anthony, what would you actually like to see happen first to help with the projects that you're working on? And I'll turn things over to you first, Powell.
Sure, thanks very much. So I think the most important thing, in my opinion, is to look at outcomes rather than the way things are done. People are really focused on labels like, oh, is it a smart city? Actually, there's a question I can see in the Q&A where someone's asked about smart versus intelligent cities. And that's exactly my point. People are focused on, oh, is it smart? Is it intelligent? Is it this? Is it that? And there's always another label that comes along. And I think a good analogy to describe this is if you look at a rainbow everyone knows the colors of the rainbow, right? But if you look at it close up and say, well, at what point does it change from red to yellow? You can't really tell, but you know once you're in red and you know once you're in yellow. So, look at outcomes and use future-proof design methodology and just kind of think in terms of vectors rather than points, I think is the key thing.
Great, thank you. Matthew, what are your thoughts?
Sure. Well, in addition to the points I emphasized earlier in the presentation on the tangible infrastructure that's necessary and how to identify those who are being left behind, I'd like to switch gears slightly to talk about the complementary aspects of the softer parts of the digital divide in terms of who has the skills to use the technology, who has access to functionalities traditionally in the fintech grouping, people who are unbanked, people who do not have the capacity to engage in e-commerce. And there's the classical dimensions of this in terms of education and outreach and so forth, but I do want to take a moment to just highlight some of the success cases that we do have from Thailand and the region in terms of things like social media adoption for e-commerce, particularly among low literacy and low access populations. I think we've seen a tremendous amount of social innovation in identifying these opportunities that are kind of in the long tail of the economic distribution. They've typically had a pretty low revenue per user, but can, in many cases, the user base is extremely high. So being able to leverage software solutions to be able to bring those components of the economy that have been traditionally low skill and traditionally excluded through some of these more innovative applications to get them participating economically is a real turbocharger. And in areas where that's worked, it's been extremely effective. It would be beneficial to focus on that and leverage it further within the technologies we do have on the ground now.
Wonderful. Thank you, Matthew. That actually brings up an interesting point. Dr. Thidi, you talked a lot about many different types of programs, which means that needs mass adoption. So building off of what Matthew has said, what would you like to see in this digital divide that will help get mass adoption that we need to see for these programs to really fly?
Right. We would need the propagation of the seeds. Right now, because of the COVID, people in the cities have gone back to the countries a lot. And you see, if you look in the countries, you see a lot of innovation from they call it young smart farmers and the young entrepreneurs and many things. It's popping up, but if we can accelerate or have some people to snap in and then coach them properly, and then enhance the digital literacies to the bigger society, it would help a lot. But we are going in a good shape, thanks to not a thanks, but because of COVID. This is what is happening. Yeah.
Well, it's good to see the bright side of any situation for sure.
Right.
So then, Anthony, that brings us to you. Obviously, Bangkok One is a very interesting project, but it will be for a very select group of individuals who are likely going to already have a lot of educational opportunities associated. So for you, looking at the population that you'll need to adopt, what are your expectations for how infrastructure and we can bridge this digital divide to make your project a success? Oh, you're on mute, Anthony.
Yeah. So for One Bangkok, it's not just for a select group of individuals. Actually, we try to cover different ranges from people from different backgrounds and different perspectives. So we really want to be an inclusive community. So I think some of the key areas that we're looking at, we would need help on is in terms of like the digital infrastructure that we're going to provide. One of the key challenges we find is trying to get technology-enabled people to help implement, help serve, and help develop. I think in general in Thailand, if we could place more emphasis in terms of, training and education for people to be able to actually learn more about the digital skills and technology and how it can be adopted. I think the second thing that would be key for us, as a developer and as we're trying to enhance other cities, not just within Bangkok, but around the world, for example, would be the governance model and how we actually create the ecosystems for technology and drive those communities to actually get better outcomes, like Paul said earlier on, about, trying to drive better outcomes and better business benefits or better community benefits. And I think that's the key for us.
Fantastic. Thank you. I look forward to your inclusive project. And now I'll turn things back over to Peter for our closing.
Okay, I think I have time for one more quick question, and it kind of goes back to the original point that Matthew made about technical infrastructure and bandwidth. Do you see a lot of this as being driven via mobile? I mean, this adoption, just because that seems to be how so many people in Thailand are accessing any of these intelligence services, smart services, regardless whether they're related to property or not, but in this case, related to property and physical infrastructure. I mean, is this built on mobile to some degree? And if so, how do we stack up in terms of the latency issues, network issues, and so forth that you described?
Thanks very much for that. I mean, the data is exceptionally clear that the deployment of mobile technology has been a huge tool in getting a certain baseline level of access into people's hands and bringing people onto the digital economy. And that being said, with as much benefit as that tool has brought us, some of the lessons learned from that are that we do hit a kind of silicon ceiling fairly quickly with that type of technology. There's really only so much you can do on a screen the size of the average smartphone. It's going to be really tough to enter and compete in the global economy if that's the limit of the technological access that you have. And in general, that's going to keep you much more on the consumer track than the producer track, which is not ultimately in people's best interests. Secondarily, as a footnote to that, another key lesson learned that I think we've seen around the globe are the privacy considerations that we have on mobile devices and the rollouts in that manner. Obviously, every month we're seeing headlines about data breaches, App Store policy enforcements, privacy protections, facial recognition, biometrics. There's a lot of very complex technical and legal issues that come in through that dimension that we need to approach very mindfully from a smart cities perspective. So together with all the great benefits we've been talking about with smart city and mobile rollout, I think we should also have some consideration to those particular aspects. And of course, obviously in Thailand, we're seeing major action on that front with PDPA and the resulting impacts on productization. So there's a lot of work to do in this area. Thanks.
Yeah, that, it's a perfect segue. I mean, I couldn't have queued you up better myself. We will do some further events from our Digital Economy Committee on exactly those issues. And clearly there's a whole event you could structure just around, the whole digital privacy aspect of smart cities and the reach of technology. So maybe we'll have you guys back to talk about that at some point in the future. And I want to thank you again as we come to the close of our session here. I want to thank you again for a really informative, we put these things together and I'm always, thinking like, oh, okay, this could be good. But man, I really learned a lot. And I think our audience probably appreciated as well. So thanks once again to the four of you for taking the time to share with us your knowledge. And I think if there's nothing else, we'll hand it back over to Heidi for a quick wrap up of what AMCHAM has in store down the line. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Peter, and thanks so much to all of our Digital Economy Committee co-chairs for putting together this program for us. And thank you so much to our speakers today. I also learned a lot on the session today, so thank you very, very much. Coming up at AMCHAM, we have our AGM later this week on Thursday, March 24th at 1 p.m. Please do register and join us for that. We're approving our auditor for 2022, as well as our 2021 President's Report and financials, which you can find on the AMCHAM website. For you Americans, on March 29th, they have a U.S. tax filing update for you, which we have about every 6 months here at AMCHAM to help you keep up to date on your taxes in the USA. On April 4th, you'll find the Aerospace Council meeting for their regular monthly meeting, and the next AMCHAM Business Today, where you can discuss any and all issues affecting your life and your business here in Thailand, and you can discuss it with other members on April 7th. Thanks very much for joining us today. I look forward to seeing you all again very soon. Bye-bye now.